A millionaire widower followed his nanny after work. What he discovered changed everything. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into the story. A millionaire widower followed his nanny after work. What he discovered changed everything. Let's go back to the main character. James sat in his car, parked across the street from the apartment building where Rachel had disappeared into just moments ago. His mind was racing with 1,000 thoughts, each one more confusing than the last. Why was she here? Why had she been so secretive? Was there something more to her life than what she had shown him? He looked at the building again, this time seeing it with a new sense of urgency. The once quiet, peaceful nanny he had trusted with his son was now a mystery, a puzzle he had to solve. His hand gripped the steering wheel tighter as he debated whether or not to go inside. He couldn't explain why he felt the need to follow her, but something deep inside him told him this was a turning point. It had been 2 years since his wife Emily passed away, and in that time, Rachel had become a steady presence in their lives. She wasn't just a nanny. She had been a friend, a confidant, and someone who seemed to understand him in ways no one else did. But now, after seeing her in this unfamiliar place, he was filled with doubt. Was she really who she claimed to be? He couldn't sit there much longer. His curiosity gnawed at him, and the need for answers pulled him out of the car. Slowly, he got out and walked across the street, trying to remain unnoticed as he approached the building. His footsteps echoed in the quiet night air, and the light breeze seemed to carry the weight of his thoughts with it. He reached the door of the apartment building, peering through the cracked window into the dimly lit hallway. His heart raced. Should he go inside? What would he find? He wasn't sure, but he had to know. Taking a deep breath, James pushed the door open and stepped inside. The building smelled faintly of old wood and dampness, and the low hum of a refrigerator echoed from somewhere deeper inside. He quietly made his way down the hallway, following the faint sound of voices. The door at the end of the hall was slightly ajar, and as he approached, he could hear Rachel's voice. She was talking to someone, but the words were too muffled for him to make out. James's curiosity was now at its peak. He leaned in closer, trying to listen in on their conversation, but then, a sudden noise behind him made him freeze. He turned quickly, his heart pounding in his chest. To his relief, it was just a cat scurrying across the floor. James let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding, and slowly moved closer to the door. As he approached, he heard Rachel's voice again, clearer now. "I know it's been tough," she said, "but I promise, things will get better. You just have to trust me." There was a pause, and then another voice, this time a man's, responded, though James couldn't quite catch the words. His curiosity got the better of him, and before he knew it, he was standing just outside the door, listening intently. Rachel spoke again, but this time her tone was different. It was softer, more vulnerable. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said, almost pleading. "I can't go back to that life. I can't." James's heart skipped a beat. What was she talking about? What kind of life was she referring to? The woman who had been so devoted to his family, was there a hidden side to her he didn't know? He had to know more. He moved closer to the door, but before he could hear any more, a hand landed gently on his shoulder. James jumped, his breath catching in his throat. He spun around to face the figure behind him. Standing there, her face filled with surprise and a touch of worry, was Rachel. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They just stood there, locked in an uncomfortable silence. Rachel was the first to break it. "James?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. "What are you doing here?" The question hung in the air, thick with tension. James didn't know how to answer. His mind raced for an excuse, but none came. He had been caught. He had followed her, and now there was no turning back. He opened his mouth to speak, but his words failed him. Rachel's eyes flickered with a mix of confusion and understanding, and then, after what felt like an eternity, she sighed. "You didn't trust me, did you?" she asked quietly. James didn't know how to respond. He had trusted her, he thought, or at least he had wanted to. But now, everything was in question. "It's not that," he said finally, his voice low. "I didn't know what to think. You've always been so secretive, Rachel. I thought I knew you, but now." His voice trailed off, and he looked at her, his eyes searching hers for answers. Rachel didn't speak immediately. She just stood there, her gaze steady. Then, slowly, she stepped aside and motioned for him to come in. "If you're going to be here, you might as well hear the truth," she said quietly. James hesitated, but only for a moment. Something in her tone told him this was the moment he had been waiting for. He took a step forward, crossing the threshold into a world he never knew existed. What he would discover next would change everything he thought he knew about Rachel and about himself. James stepped into the dimly lit apartment, his heart pounding in his chest as he followed Rachel into the small living room. The space was far from the luxury he was used to, with peeling wallpaper and mismatched furniture. But there was something oddly comforting about it, something that made him feel as though he had just entered a different world altogether. Rachel motioned for him to sit on the worn couch, her eyes avoiding his as she took a seat across from him. The silence between them stretched on, heavy with unspoken words, until Rachel finally spoke. "I didn't want you to see this side of me," she said softly, her voice carrying a note of vulnerability he had never heard before. James felt his chest tighten, his mind racing as he tried to make sense of what was happening. He had followed her here, thinking he would uncover some dark secret, but now, sitting in her humble apartment, he realized that the truth was far more complicated than he had imagined. "I'm not the person you think I am," Rachel continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just trying to survive, James." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, James didn't know how to respond. The Rachel he knew had always been calm, collected, and dependable. She had taken care of Ethan like he was her own, and in turn, James had come to rely on her in ways he hadn't realized until now. But now, sitting in front of him, she seemed like a different person, entirely vulnerable, unsure, almost broken. "I don't understand," James said finally, his voice low. "Why didn't you tell me about this? About your life?" Rachel's eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of the pain she had been hiding. "Because I didn't want you to see me like this," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I didn't want you to look at me the way I've seen other people look at me. People who think I'm just someone to be pitied." James felt a pang of guilt hit him as he realized how little he had truly known about her. He had seen Rachel as nothing more than a nanny, a caretaker, someone who existed only in the background of his life. But now, as she sat before him, he saw her as a person, a woman with her own struggles, her own fears, her own dreams. "Rachel," James said, his voice soft but firm, "I never thought of you that way. I never meant to make you feel small or insignificant." Rachel shook her head, her eyes filling with tears she quickly wiped away. "It's not about you, James," she said, her voice breaking. "It's about me, about the choices I've had to make to survive." She paused, taking a deep breath as though gathering the strength to continue. "I grew up in a family that didn't have much. My parents worked hard, but it was never enough. I had to fight for everything I've ever had. When I lost my job a few years ago, I didn't have a choice but to take whatever I could find. And when I found this job, I thought maybe I had finally found something stable. But even now, with all of this," she gestured to the apartment around her, "I'm still barely holding on." James listened, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. He had always thought of Rachel as someone with her life together, someone who had everything under control. But now, as she shared her story with him, he realized how much he had misunderstood. "Rachel," James said again, his voice more gentle this time, "I had no idea. I had no idea what you were going through." Rachel looked at him, her eyes softening as she took in his expression. "I didn't want to burden you with my problems," she said quietly. "You have enough on your plate with Ethan and the company. You've been through so much already." James shook his head, his hand reaching out to gently take hers. "Rachel, you're not a burden. I'm sorry for not seeing the truth sooner. I should have known you were more than just a nanny to me. You've become a part of this family." The words hung in the air, and for the first time since he entered her apartment, Rachel smiled a small, tentative smile, but a smile nonetheless. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. James sat back, the reality of what he had just learned sinking in. He had followed her here, thinking he was uncovering some hidden secret, but what he had found was something much more valuable. He had found Rachel's truth, her struggle, and a new understanding of who she was. "So, what now?" he asked, his voice quieter now, as if he were afraid to disrupt the fragile moment they were sharing. Rachel's smile faded slightly, and she looked down at their hands, her fingers gently tracing the lines of his. "Now," she said softly, We face the truth together." James nodded, feeling a sense of clarity that had been absent for so long. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, he felt like he wasn't alone. Together, they would face whatever came next. And as Rachel sat beside him, her head resting against his shoulder, James realized that perhaps he had been searching for the wrong thing all along. The answers he needed were not in the secrets he thought she was hiding, but in the connection they had built over time, the bond that had always been there, just waiting to be recognized. James sat there, his hand still holding Rachel's, both of them sitting in the dimly lit apartment. The weight of their conversation hung heavily between them, but for the first time, there was a sense of calm that had settled over him, a quiet acceptance. He had followed Rachel here, thinking he was going to uncover a secret, but instead, he had discovered something much more valuable. A woman who had struggled in silence, a woman who had been quietly fighting for her life, her dignity, and for the family she had come to care for. Rachel looked at him, her eyes soft but weary, as if the weight of her confession had lifted a burden she had been carrying for far too long. She took a deep breath, breaking the silence. "I didn't think you would understand," she said quietly. "I didn't think anyone could, but you're different." James squeezed her hand gently, his heart aching for her. He didn't realize how much pain she had been hiding, how much she had sacrificed to get by. "I'm sorry, Rachel," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "I should have seen it. I should have known what you were going through, and I should have been there for you." Rachel shook her head, a small, bittersweet smile playing on her lips. "It wasn't your fault, James," she said softly. "You've had your own battles to fight, and I never wanted to burden you with mine. I just wanted to do my job, take care of Ethan, and make sure he was happy. That's all I ever wanted." James felt a pang in his chest. Ethan, his son, had become attached to Rachel, and James had never questioned the bond they had formed. She had been more than just a nanny to him. She had been a mother figure, a steady presence in his chaotic life. And now, sitting here, he realized that Rachel had been carrying so much more than anyone had known. "I never knew how hard it had been for you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've been so strong, so independent, and I never saw it. But now I do, and I want to help. I don't want you to feel like you're alone in this anymore." Rachel looked at him, her eyes searching his face as if trying to gauge his sincerity. She took a slow breath before speaking again. "I don't need charity, James," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I don't need you to fix things for me. I just needed someone to understand, someone to see me for who I am." James nodded, his grip tightening on her hand. "I understand, Rachel," he said gently. "And I don't want to fix everything. I just want to be there for you, to support you, the way you've supported Ethan and me all this time." The room was silent for a moment, the only sound being the soft hum of the city outside. Rachel looked away, her gaze falling to the floor as if lost in thought. James couldn't help but notice how fragile she seemed, how much she had endured in her quiet struggle. He could see the scars, not the physical ones, but the ones that ran deeper, those emotional wounds that had shaped her, that had made her the woman sitting before him now. "James," Rachel said, her voice breaking the silence, "I don't know how to ask this, but what happens now? After all of this? I'm just a nanny. I never thought my life would be anything more than that. I don't know what to do with all of this." James could feel the uncertainty in her words, the hesitation in her voice. She was scared, not just of the unknown, but of the changes that might come. It was clear that Rachel had built walls around herself, walls she had carefully constructed to protect her heart. But now, sitting here with him, those walls were starting to crumble. "Rachel, you're more than just a nanny," James said, his voice steady and sure. "You've been a mother to Ethan, and that means more to me than anything. You've been there for him, for me, when I needed it the most. You've given so much of yourself, and I want to make sure you know that you're not alone. Whatever happens next, I'll be here." Rachel looked up at him, her eyes wide as if processing his words, and for the first time, a real tear slipped down her cheek. James reached up and gently wiped it away, his hand lingering on her cheek for a moment. "You don't have to go through this alone, Rachel. I don't have all the answers, but I'm willing to figure it out with you." The words hung in the air between them, and for a long moment neither of them moved. It was as though time had slowed, and all that mattered was the unspoken connection that had formed between them. Finally, Rachel nodded, her lips trembling as she spoke. "I don't know what this means yet," she said softly, "but I'm willing to see where it goes." James smiled, his heart lifting. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was hope. They didn't have all the answers, and they didn't know what the future would hold. But in that moment, they had each other. And that was enough. As James sat there holding Rachel's hand, he realized that he hadn't just followed her to her apartment that night to uncover a secret. He had followed her because he had been searching for something deeper, something real, and now he had found it, with Rachel, together. Days passed, and things slowly began to change. James couldn't stop thinking about the conversation he had had with Rachel that night. Every time he saw her with Ethan, every smile she shared with his son, he was reminded of the depth of her commitment, not just as a nanny, but as a person who had quietly given so much of herself. It was as if he had been blind to everything around him before, and now everything seemed to make sense. But still, there was the lingering question of what would happen next. Rachel was right. She had always been a nanny, a caregiver, someone who had never expected anything more from life. But now, James couldn't just leave her in that role. He wanted her to know that she deserved more. One afternoon, after Ethan had gone to bed, James invited Rachel to sit with him in the living room. He could tell she was nervous, fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve as she sat across from him. "Rachel," James began, his voice calm but determined, "I've been thinking about what you said that night, about not knowing what happens now, and I need you to know that I'm not asking you to be something you're not. But I also can't sit by and let you feel like you don't have options, like you don't deserve more than this." Rachel looked up at him, her eyes wide, as if she wasn't sure where this conversation was going. James continued, his voice softer now. "You've always been there for Ethan, for me. You've helped me more than you can imagine. But you also have your own life, your own dreams. You deserve a chance to live those dreams. You don't need to be stuck here because you feel like you have nowhere else to go." Rachel shook her head, her eyes filling with emotion. "James, I don't want charity. I never have. I just wanted to do something good for you and Ethan, that's all I've ever wanted." James leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "Rachel, this isn't charity. This is me offering you something I think you deserve, a chance to have your own life, your own space, to build the future you want. I've seen the strength in you. I know you're capable of more than you even realize." There was a long silence as Rachel processed his words. Her fingers twisted together in her lap, and she looked away for a moment, clearly deep in thought. When she finally spoke, her voice was small but steady. "I don't know what to say, James," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've never had anyone offer me something like that before. I've always had to fight for everything. I didn't think I could have the life I really wanted." James reached out, gently placing his hand over hers. "Rachel, you can have that life. I know you've been through a lot, but you don't have to keep fighting on your own. I'm here for you, and I want to help you find what you need." Rachel's breath hitched as she met his gaze, her eyes brimming with tears. For the first time, James saw her vulnerability, the walls she had built up to protect herself from the world. And in that moment, he realized just how much she had been carrying. "I don't know if I'm ready for all of this," Rachel said, her voice shaking. "I don't know if I deserve it." James gently squeezed her hand. "You do, Rachel. You deserve everything. I don't expect you to have all the answers right now, but just know that whatever you decide, I'm here." Rachel's lips trembled as she tried to hold back the tears, but they came anyway. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for seeing me, for understanding." James smiled, his heart swelling with warmth. "You don't need to thank me, Rachel. You've earned this, and you're not alone in this anymore." The days that followed were filled with small changes, moments of quiet understanding between them. Rachel began to open up more, not just about her past, but about her dreams for the future. She had always been afraid to hope for more, but now, with James's support, she felt like maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward. James watched her, amazed at the woman he had come to know. She was stronger than he had realized, and yet, she had never asked for anything in return. As the weeks went by, Rachel began taking steps toward building the future she had always dreamed of. She enrolled in a local art class, something she had always wanted to do but never thought possible. James encouraged her every step of the way, helping her find the confidence she needed to chase her passions. Their relationship grew, not just as employer and employee but as something deeper. There were moments of laughter, moments of understanding, and even moments of silence where they just sat together, enjoying each other's company. They weren't perfect, and there were still things they didn't know about each other. But for the first time in a long time, James felt like they were building something real. One evening, after a quiet dinner, James turned to Rachel, his expression serious. "Rachel," he said, his voice soft but filled with conviction, "I know I've already said this, but I want you to understand something. You've changed my life. You've changed Ethan's life. And now, I want to change yours." Rachel looked at him, her brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice tentative. James took a deep breath, steadying himself. "I'm asking you, Rachel, will you stay with us? Not just as a nanny, but as a part of our family. I want you to be here, with me and Ethan, for as long as you want." Rachel's eyes widened, her heart beating faster as she processed his words. She had never expected anything like this. And as she looked at him, at the sincerity in his eyes, she realized that maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something beautiful. Rachel sat there, her heart racing as James's words sank in. He wanted her to stay not just as a nanny, but as a part of their family. The idea was so overwhelming that for a moment she couldn't process it. She had always felt like an outsider in the world of wealth and privilege, never daring to dream that she could belong to something so permanent. But here James was, offering her a place in his life, a life she had never imagined she would be a part of. She looked at him, her mind swirling with questions and emotions. "James, I don't know what to say," Rachel whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of disbelief and fear. "I never thought something like this could happen. I never thought I could have a place in a family like yours." James reached out, gently touching her hand, his eyes soft with understanding. "Rachel, you're already a part of our family," he said, his voice steady and reassuring. "You've been there for Ethan, for me, in ways no one else has. You've helped us heal, and you've shown us what it means to truly care. You've earned a place here with us." Rachel's breath caught in her throat as she struggled to hold back the tears. She had never felt so seen, so valued. For so long, she had kept her guard up, convinced that she was just a temporary part of their lives, a worker who would eventually be replaced. But now, sitting here with James, she realized that things were different. She wasn't just a nanny anymore. She was someone who mattered. "But James," Rachel said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, "I'm not like the people you're used to. I don't have the same background, the same wealth, the same." She faltered, unsure of how to finish. James interrupted her, his gaze intense. "Rachel, none of that matters. You've never needed any of that to be important to us. What matters is who you are, what you've done for Ethan and me. That's why I'm asking you to stay. Because you've already shown me what it means to be part of something real, something that goes beyond money or status." Rachel sat there in silence, her emotions swirling inside her. She had never imagined this, never thought she could be a part of something like this. The idea of being more than just a caretaker, of being truly seen and loved for who she was both terrifying and beautiful. She looked down at their hands, her fingers intertwining with his, and for the first time in her life, she felt a sense of belonging that had always eluded her. "I never thought I could be a part of something like this," Rachel said, her voice barely audible. "I never thought I would be accepted. But now, with you, with Ethan, it feels like maybe I could be." James smiled, his heart swelling with affection. "You already are, Rachel. You always have been." The days that followed were filled with small but meaningful moments. Rachel began to truly open up to James, sharing more about her past, her hopes, and her dreams. She enrolled in an art class, something she had always wanted to do but never felt she had the time or the courage to pursue. James encouraged her every step of the way, proud of her for taking this new step toward her own future. They spent more time together, talking late into the night, sharing their fears and their desires. James learned that Rachel had always dreamed of having her own art studio, a place where she could create without limits. It was something she had always kept to herself, too afraid to pursue it. But now, with James's support, she felt like it was possible. Ethan, too, noticed the change in Rachel. She was more confident, more alive. She smiled more, laughed more, and for the first time in a long time, she looked at life with hope instead of resignation. James couldn't help but smile as he watched her interact with his son, seeing the bond between them grow even stronger. It wasn't just a professional relationship anymore. It was something deeper, something that felt like family. One evening, after a quiet dinner, James looked at Rachel, his expression serious but warm. "Rachel," he said, his voice low, "I know we've talked about a lot of things, but I want to ask you something." Rachel looked at him, her heart racing. "What is it?" she asked, her voice filled with curiosity and a touch of apprehension. James took a deep breath before continuing. "I know this is fast, and I know we've been through a lot, but I want you to know that I'm ready for more. For us, for whatever comes next." Rachel's eyes widened as she took in his words. She had known there was something more between them, but hearing him say it aloud made her heart skip a beat. "James, are you saying?" She trailed off, not quite believing what she was hearing. James smiled gently. "Yes, Rachel, I want to build a life with you. With Ethan, with me, with all of us. We've already started something beautiful, and I want to keep going. I don't know where it'll lead, but I know I want you there. With us." Rachel's breath caught in her throat as she processed his words. She had never imagined that she could have a life like this, a life filled with love, acceptance, and the possibility of a future she had never dared to dream of. Tears welled up in her eyes as she smiled, her heart overwhelmed with emotion. "Yes, James," she whispered, her voice thick with tears. "Yes, I want that too. I want to be with you. With Ethan. With this family." James leaned forward, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Then it's settled," he said softly, his voice filled with affection. "We'll build this together. Whatever comes next, we'll face it as a family." In that moment, Rachel knew that everything had changed. She had found a place where she belonged, a place where she was loved, not for what she had, but for who she was. And for the first time in her life, she felt truly at home. The weeks following Rachel's acceptance were filled with a new energy that had been missing from their lives for so long. James, Rachel, and Ethan began to build a new routine, one that was filled with laughter, shared moments, and the feeling of togetherness. Rachel's art classes were going well, and James couldn't help but admire the passion she had for her work. He watched as she grew more confident, more sure of herself, and the spark in her eyes became brighter with each passing day. But even as things were getting better, there was an undeniable tension building in the background. James had always been a man of action, focused on achieving his goals. But now, with Rachel and Ethan in his life, there was a new challenge before him: how to truly balance everything. It wasn't just about running a successful business anymore. It was about being there for the people he loved, being present, and not letting the pressures of the world pull him away. One evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Rachel suddenly spoke, her voice hesitant. "James, I've been thinking," she began, her eyes meeting his. "I know we've been talking about building a life together, and I want that more than anything. But there's something I've been worried about." James looked at her, his heart racing slightly. "What is it, Rachel?" he asked, his voice soft. "It's just," she hesitated. "I don't want you to feel like you have to give up everything, just for me and Ethan. I know you've worked so hard to build your company, and I don't want you to sacrifice your dreams for us." James shook his head, taking her hand in his. "Rachel, my dreams aren't just about work anymore. My dreams have changed, just like my life has. You and Ethan are part of those dreams now, and I want to build something that includes all of us." Rachel smiled, her heart warmed by his words, but there was still a hint of uncertainty in her eyes. "I just don't want you to feel like you're losing yourself in all of this," she said quietly. "I don't want you to forget who you are, what you want." James squeezed her hand gently. "I haven't forgotten, Rachel," he reassured her. "You've helped me see what really matters. I've spent so many years chasing success, but now I know that success is nothing without the people you love. Without you, without Ethan, this is who I am now." For a moment they just sat there in silence, the weight of the conversation settling between them. James could feel the sincerity in Rachel's words, her concern for him, but he knew deep down that they were on the right path. They had built something real, something meaningful, and he wasn't going to let it slip away. As the weeks passed, Rachel continued to thrive in her art classes, and James found himself making more time for his family, learning how to balance work and life. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. The real test came when James was offered a major business opportunity, one that could take his company to new heights, but it would require him to travel extensively and spend even more time away from home. The offer was tempting, and James couldn't deny the excitement he felt at the prospect of expanding his empire. But as he thought about it, he realized something. This wasn't just about business anymore. It was about the life he had started to build with Rachel and Ethan. It was about being there for them, for all of them. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, James sat down with Rachel in the living room, the soft glow of the fireplace casting a warm light across the room. "Rachel, I've been offered an incredible opportunity," he said, his voice serious. "But it would mean traveling a lot, being away from home for long stretches of time. And I've been thinking I don't know if that's the right choice for me anymore." Rachel turned to him, her expression understanding. "You don't have to make that decision alone, James," she said softly. "What do you really want? What feels right for you?" James took a deep breath, his mind racing as he considered the possibilities. He had always been driven by success, by the desire to achieve more. But now, with Rachel and Ethan by his side, he realized that what he truly wanted was a life where they were his priority, where he was present for them, not just physically but emotionally. "I want to be here, with you and Ethan," James said finally, his voice firm. "I want to build a life where we can all be together, and I don't want to miss out on that. I've spent too many years working nonstop, trying to prove something to the world, but now I know that the most important thing is being here for the people I love." Rachel smiled softly, her eyes filled with pride. "I'm so glad you're seeing that, James," she said, her voice full of warmth. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone. You've already built something amazing with us." James smiled, feeling a sense of peace wash over him. He knew he had made the right decision, and as he looked at Rachel, he felt more certain than ever that the future they were building together was the only one he wanted. It wasn't about success or wealth. It was about love, about family, and about the life they could create together. And as they sat there, hand in hand, James realized that everything he had ever truly wanted was right here, with them. Months passed, and James, Rachel, and Ethan settled into their new routine. Things felt more balanced, more natural than they ever had before. James had made the decision to take a step back from the relentless grind of his career and focus on what truly mattered: his family. Rachel continued to thrive in her art classes, and the confidence she had gained was evident in everything she did. It was as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders, and she was finally embracing the person she had always been meant to be. Ethan, too, was flourishing. With Rachel there to care for him, he had become more open, more trusting, and more eager to explore the world around him. James had never seen him so happy. Their home was filled with laughter and love, and the future seemed bright. But as much as things were improving, there was still one question lingering in James's mind. What was next? He had everything he needed in his family, yet he still felt the pull of his past life, the desire to do more, to achieve even greater things. One evening, after they had tucked Ethan into bed, James and Rachel sat down in the living room, their usual spot by the fireplace. The quiet warmth of the room surrounded them, but there was an air of contemplation between them. Rachel noticed the look on James's face, the far-off gaze in his eyes, and she knew what was on his mind. "You're thinking about work, aren't you?" she asked softly, her voice gentle. James looked at her, his expression a mix of uncertainty and longing. "I can't help it," he said, his voice low. "I've spent so much of my life chasing success, trying to prove something. Now I'm here with you and Ethan, and I want to be present for all of you. But there's still a part of me that feels like there's something more I need to do." Rachel listened carefully, her heart understanding the struggle he was going through. She knew James well enough to know that the man who had built an empire wouldn't be satisfied with just stepping away from everything. But she also knew that the life they had built together, the family they had become, was just as important as his ambitions. "James," Rachel began, her voice steady but filled with emotion, "you've already done so much. You've created something amazing, something that has allowed you to be here with us. But what I've seen in you these last few months, what I've felt with you, is something that no amount of success can replace. You have a family now, a life that is rich with love, and that's more than enough." James's eyes softened as he looked at Rachel, her words sinking deep into his heart. He had been torn for so long, uncertain about whether he could ever truly leave his ambitions behind. But Rachel's words reminded him of something he had always known deep down. He had already found what he had been searching for. "I don't know what the future holds," James said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "But I know that what I have with you and Ethan is enough. It's everything I need, and I want to keep building this life with you." Rachel smiled, her heart swelling with affection for the man she had come to love. "We're already building it, James," she said softly. "Every day, every moment. It's not about what we achieve in the world. It's about what we have right here, together." James reached out and took her hand, his thumb brushing over her fingers as he thought about everything they had been through, everything they had overcome. He realized that his success was no longer measured by how much he could achieve in the world. It was measured by the love and connection he had with Rachel and Ethan. That was the true measure of success. "You're right," he said, his voice filled with a sense of clarity he hadn't felt in years. "This is my success. This is what matters." As they sat there, hand in hand, the fire crackling softly in the background, James knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. The road ahead wasn't always going to be easy, but with Rachel and Ethan by his side, he felt ready for whatever life threw at him. They had built something strong, something lasting, and nothing could take that away from them. Rachel leaned her head on James's shoulder, and for the first time in a long time, she felt at peace. They had found their balance, their rhythm, and their place in the world. Together they had created something beautiful, something worth holding on to. "I love you," James whispered, his voice filled with tenderness. "I love you too," Rachel whispered back, her heart full. And in that moment, as the world outside seemed to fade away, they both knew that no matter what the future held, they would always have each other. They had everything they needed, and together, they could face anything. Months passed, and life for James, Rachel, and Ethan continued to evolve in ways they never expected. What had started as a simple decision to take a step back from work had grown into something far more profound. James had found a new balance in life. One that was not just about his career, but about his family, his love for Rachel, and the future they were building together. Rachel, too, had blossomed. Her art continued to flourish, and she felt more confident than ever in herself and her dreams. She had finally found the courage to pursue what she truly wanted, knowing that she had the full support of James and Ethan behind her. One afternoon, as James came home from work, he found Rachel and Ethan in the living room, laughing and talking about something that seemed to make them both incredibly happy. The sight of them, his son, his future, and the woman who had become so much a part of his life, filled his heart with a quiet contentment. He had everything he needed right here. As he walked into the room, Ethan ran over to him with a big smile. "Daddy, look at what I made," Ethan said, holding up a drawing he had clearly put a lot of effort into. James knelt down to get a closer look, his heart swelling with pride. It was a picture of their family, with him, Rachel, and Ethan all smiling together. "That's amazing, buddy," James said, ruffling his son's hair. "You did a great job." Rachel smiled at the two of them, her eyes sparkling with affection. "He's been drawing all day," she said softly. "I think he's trying to make a perfect family picture." James's chest tightened as he looked at the drawing. It wasn't just a picture, it was a symbol of everything they had become, everything they had built together. For the first time in his life, James realized that this was it. This was what he had been searching for all along. Not success, not power, but love, connection, and the quiet moments that made life truly meaningful. That night, as they sat around the dinner table, James looked at Rachel and Ethan with a sense of gratitude he had never felt before. He had been given a second chance, a chance to create a life that was full of meaning, and he wasn't going to let it slip away. After dinner, as they all relaxed together on the couch, James turned to Rachel, his heart full. "Rachel," he said, his voice quiet but filled with conviction, "I don't think I've ever said this before, but I just want you to know how much I appreciate you. You've brought so much into our lives. You've given me the family I never thought I needed, and you've shown me what really matters." Rachel's eyes softened as she looked at him, her heart swelling with emotion. "James, you've done the same for me," she said, her voice thick with tears. "I never imagined my life would be like this, but now I can't imagine it any other way. You've made me believe in myself again, and I'll be forever grateful for that." James took her hand in his thumb gently tracing the lines of her palm. "We've come a long way, Rachel, and I know that no matter what happens next, we're in this together. We've built something beautiful, and it's only going to keep growing." Rachel smiled through her tears, nodding in agreement. "Together," she whispered. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, James didn't fear it. He didn't need to chase after more success or power. He had everything he needed right here in this moment, with the people he loved most. He had Rachel, who had brought him back to life in ways he couldn't have imagined, and Ethan, the son who had helped him rediscover what truly mattered. And together, they would face whatever came next, not as individuals, but as a family. As they sat there, hand in hand, surrounded by love and warmth, James knew one thing for certain: the best was yet to come. The life they had built was just the beginning, and whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, with strength, with love, and with the unshakable bond they had forged. With Rachel and Ethan by his side, James had found something greater than any achievement or career success. He had found a home, a family, and a love that would last a lifetime.